Good evening.
Hello.
How you doing, young man?
Good man.
Well, hey, we're going to get started. We turned the air down, so hopefully it'll get a little more comfortable. Man, the humidity and the rain today made it just kind of hot, right? So, my name is Larry Grayway. I pastor Kennesaw Family Life Church. We're sponsoring this. Heather is a part of our church, but she does so much. And I want to introduce you to Heather in just a minute. I know a lot of you in the room know Heather, but a lot of you don't. A lot of the idea for this she's going to share in a minute comes from a book she put out called Words Are Hard. And I want her to just take a second to explain kind of the idea behind tonight and why this is important. Some of you are aware that this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I know as a church we're highlighting stuff every week surrounding mental health awareness. I know we've got some explorers here, some different officers here, talking with Chief Westenberger. Domestic violence, things like that are on the rise in Kennesaw. Probably one of the safest communities you can live in this part of the country, and yet we see a big rise in domestic violence and other things. So we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I'm going to let Heather introduce herself, tell a little bit about this. Now, I want to give this. This night is only successful if you ask questions and communicate. The idea behind this is a discussion around these issues and what's going on with stuff in our culture and this book. So, go ahead.
Where am I supposed to?
In front of your mouth. That's where generally it works best.
Sorry, I'm not really used to using microphones. Try to avoid them. As he mentioned, last year I published a book, Words Are Hard. It's actually a photo essay. It's one of two that I published last year. And in that photo essay, there are actually 3 different projects that are combined together to create one overall photo essay. And the idea behind it is how often do you have a hard time talking to people about your feelings? See, you're not even doing that. For me, I have a hard time expressing myself verbally a lot of times, hence Words Are Hard is actually a joke. Someone said you should call the book that, and I said, okay. But the goal for tonight is to start a conversation about mental health, to help destigmatize mental illness. Okay, raise your hand if you have mental health. For the record, every hand should be raised. 1 in 4 have a mental illness as well. So I know I'm not the only one in here that is dealing with mental illness issues. And that's okay. It's no different than a chronic physical illness or dealing with therapy.
It's just an all-around illness.
Such love in the room.
So the goal tonight is, like I said, to destigmatize mental health and mental illness. But it's also to help people recognize that sometimes when you're going through that dark place, it's okay to reach out for help. And to maybe try to recognize when someone you care about is going through it, because they're probably not going to reach out. And then last, also to kind of talk a little bit about the hope. And for me, hope is something that's always been kind of scary, because once you lose it, it's so much harder to get it back. Well, like you mentioned, we really want this to be a conversation with you guys. Not just because I had 2 teeth pulled, so talking is a little painful. So why don't we go ahead and get this started? And I'm going to hand the microphone back to him because he has a list of questions.
I do have the list of questions, and Heather did have 2 teeth pulled yesterday. It was supposed to happen next Friday, and she was having such a difficult time with it. So if she looks a little loopy, that's why. No, that's just normal. Because I don't even think you're on pain meds right now. So, what do you think of? Because you got the book "Words Are Hard." What do you think of when you hear that title? What do you think that book's going to be about? And that is not a rhetorical question. So, anybody got any ideas?
Communication.
Communication. All right. Difficult communication.
having a hard time getting across to people what you are feeling. Like,
Yeah.
making sure that they are on the same page as you.
Okay, so communicating well, effectively? Yeah.
Finding the right words to say what you want to say.
All right. Sounds like a song.
I think,
Anyway,
I
yeah.
think the other side of that, I thought that it was like the fact that things people say to you can hurt you.
See? Yeah.
Say the fear of rejection.
Fear of rejection.
In terms of putting something in and trying to communicate.
Absolutely. These are all correct. There's no one correct answer in this because the point of that question is this. Everybody's affected differently. We have different filters in how we view things. For some person, words are hard because we don't communicate well and people don't understand what we're trying to say. Heather's told me that a number of times. She tries to communicate stuff and she goes, I don't think they really understand what I'm trying to say to them.
One of those that ended why.
Yeah. Then, Selena mentioned having, words can hurt. The way we say things, the way we interact with people. Words are hard, really come from three basic things. The first thing is this, and I know we don't want to talk about COVID much anymore, but I want to throw this out there. How many times, or what do you think the impact has been on people's lives after the last 2 years? When it comes to communication, interaction, just their overall lifestyle, and as it relates to mental health. What has that impact been for the last 2 years?
Isolation.
Isolation. Okay.
I think it was either detrimental to one's mental health or it was very good for one's mental health because, instead of going in person to school and seeing all the people and having social anxiety, you're just behind a screen and you didn't really have to deal with what happens at social gatherings. And then on the other hand, like he was saying, isolation, feeling like you're sort of...
Okay. Okay.
Well, and bringing up the social anxiety thing, after being cocooned for a while, you do have to start going out and seeing people again. It's like it's just exacerbated.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
One good thing about COVID is people are less likely to hug.
Just do the elbows.
Heather loves hugs, by the way. So, I am one of the few people she will actually hug. So,
It's true though, and I actually remember last year, and it was during COVID. We were at an event at the park, and it was a church event, and it was a very nice lady who didn't grasp the concept, I didn't want to be touched. And she seemed to think me cringing was a sign to hold me tighter. Thankfully, Jennifer came and rescued me.
yeah.
Body language.
So, any other impacts? I want to give a chance to talk about it. What have you seen in the mental health world, just in general, over the last couple of years? Whether it was the impact of the initial kind of shutdown, or maybe the impact of a simulation back into a normal flow of life. Because I think we're at a point now, I know things aren't completely back to normal, but we are operating more like we were prior to that shutdown.
When you think about the impact of COVID, it's like a Louisiana gumbo.
I'm waiting to hear where this goes.
If you listen, there are so many people that talk about the good things about COVID, and then there are those who talk about the bad things about COVID. And when you stop to look at it, you think about the initial impact. Goodness, what do you mean that we're closing down the world? And then you hear the scary thing about things will never be the same. And then you think about readjusting, going back. So it's almost like you get a culture shock, and then you're coming back to the real world that you're used to, but now you're getting another culture shock there. So it's like so much that's happening there that it's almost like, it's like words are hard So, you cannot explain it. It's like you watch it and you're just wondering, how are people going to survive on a daily basis as I go about, working with people and talking to people, is you can have, it's like you're having the four seasons in the same hour. It's like it's just so much happening, and it's a spaghetti junction that you're trying to unwind, and that's where people are right now. There's no one way to even explain it. It's just.
That's great, Stephen. I appreciate that. Now, I'm going to kind of narrow this in. That goes back to a little bit more of the heart behind the book. I asked about the impact of COVID because for some people, for them, that isolation was a deep sense of loss. A loss of community, a loss of work, a loss of, you can put a lot of different things. I'll even share for myself, a large part of what we do as a church is do stuff with the city. And I see a lot, with the explorers and the officers. I used to go in the police department all the time. I used to walk in, and then all of a sudden, things that I used to do on a normal basis, I could not do. And so there was a sense of loss about that. And there is an impact to how we respond to it, to our mental health on that. Is there anything you want to kind of share along those lines, Heather, about the impact side?
Sure.
Go for it.
It's close enough.
Yes.
Thank you. So each of these photos is representative of one of the sections of the Words Are Hard book. And for those of you, which is probably 99% of you, who are not familiar, there is a recovery model. It's the 5 stages of recovery. And the book covers loosely my story, covering the first 3 stages. And the first stage is, and he hates this term, but the impact of illness, which is depicted here. Now, I prefer to refer to it as the identity stolen. Essentially what happens is you're going through life and all of a sudden you are given a diagnosis and you are no longer yourself. I was given a diagnosis and suddenly I was no longer Heather. I was bipolar disorder and Asperger's and PTSD and anything else under the sun they felt like calling it that day. And that was just from the clinical side of things. And then when people found out I was no longer Heather, I was a screw-up. I was psycho, unless you went to Cartersville High School, then I was psychedelic because they're idiots and they thought it was the same thing. Sorry, but he needed some humor. But the whole idea behind the Identity Stolen project was to help illustrate how impact of illness affected me. And it affects a lot of other people when your identity gets wrapped up in your diagnosis. And it couldn't be, like he was saying, when you lost the ability to go into the police station whenever you wanted without handcuffs.
That'd been one way to get in.
But we did. When COVID hit, a lot of people, they lost their sense of identity. I lost my routine, which really messed me up because I didn't know what to do anymore. I had wrapped my routine into my identity and it became part of me, so when I lost that, I felt like I was lost. So who out there has ever had a time in their life when something happened? It could be an illness, it could be an injury, it could be going to church, and all of a sudden, you don't feel like you were who you were before. I guess it's tie-dye.
There's been a few times, but I don't know. I shattered my ankle last year, which doesn't sound like it's significant, but I couldn't do anything the way, I couldn't walk for 2 months, 2 to 3 months. So I was kind of just in bed. And then I lost all my sense of, my sense of, what am I trying to say? Independency, yeah. I couldn't do anything. I was like, well, this sucks. So I kind of just lost all the things that I like to do for a long time. And I was like, well, this is terrible. Let's not do this again.
I would second that. Ankle injuries never fully heal. What about somebody else? What about you, Larry?
Well, I'm just going to piggyback off of this. You see how there's got the stickers that are on there on the pictures. And you may not want to share it, and that's okay. But people that struggle with mental health issues, they go in and see a counselor, or they go in and get a diagnosis, or even take the mental health side of it out, and maybe somebody got a diagnosis of cancer or other things that takes away a bit of who they have been. And that's what she's talking about when she talks about the impact of illness. I don't like the term impact of illness because I don't think everything around it is an illness that can impact us. There could be many things in our life that impact us and give us that sense. It could be something in our home, maybe an affair of a spouse, or the loss of a child. Those aren't necessarily illnesses, but they have an impact. And how we interact with people that go through that, on the mental health side, when you get labels and things like that, we treat people differently. I'm a pastor. I sat down with other pastors the other day, and we were talking about how one of the biggest problems the church has done is when people have come in that have struggled with mental health issues and we don't know or are uncomfortable with what to do, we tend to push them to the outside. Because we don't know how to help it, we don't want it to affect anybody else's experience, instead of helping people. And so there's an impact on what that has to somebody's psychological well-being, to their mental health, to their sense of self-worth, because their identity is no longer wrapped up. The same thing for somebody that has a job that they've done for a long time and maybe they lost that job. Or maybe they had an accident that caused paralysis and they no longer can do what they were doing before. There's that sense of impact. So I want to transition that. Does everybody understand that? Any other comments on that? Because I want to move us to the next thing, which is kind of that sense of hopelessness that you get when you lose that identity. Now, Heather calls it
Fighting the darkness.
fighting the darkness. But, and if you feel comfortable with this, I know I've had that. Have you ever felt that sense of hopelessness? Yeah. That sense that I'm not going to be anything more than what those stickers say. Or that sense that what I have is no longer going to be relevant or viable. I've lost a little bit of who I am. Now, I would love it if somebody would share maybe a little bit of either their own personal experience themselves, and I know that's a big risk. It's a safe place, hopefully. Or maybe sometime when you've helped somebody that's felt that place of darkness or hopelessness. Maybe you've had somebody in your life that's battled with depression for a long period of time. And that's a tough deal. Anybody would like to share a little bit? Yeah.
I've recently been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which is, I was very happy that you included it in all of those little stickers over there. But yeah, people with that have very little self-identity. They don't really know who they are to begin with. So when they get diagnoses like that, it doesn't really affect much because you don't really know who you are anyway. So you get these diagnoses and you're like, okay, so now what? What do I do to get better? How do I become a person and not just an illness? So in my experience, yeah, I feel the darkness almost every single day, and I just have to learn how to be okay with it and surround myself with people who understand it.
Okay. So you understand where that feels like. Anyone else want to share something? I appreciate that. Yeah,
Rejection by mentors.
rejection by mentors. Okay. All right.
Another way to look at this, and the way it was taught to me, is the life is limited phase. He loves that, by the way. Oftentimes what will happen is once you've gotten this impact, you're going through life, you have all these goals, you're excited, you have a plan for your life, and then all of a sudden you're told, nope, you have X, Y, Z disease. Guess what? Life is over. And at first you reject it and you buck against it, you're like, oh, whatever, inappropriate language goes here. But then you find yourself going, well, wait, maybe they're right. And you get stuck. And maybe you don't get to the point where I do. Maybe you just give up on life. You resign yourself to the fact that this is as good as life is going to get, so I try. For me, when I get to that place, it's okay, I'll beat you later. That's when I struggle with suicidal thoughts. It's been close to 12 years since my last attempt. I should not actually be standing here tonight. I was on a ventilator for 2 days. Apparently they did an EEG to confirm brain function. Not sure they found it, but I'm here, so. But that darkness can look different for everybody, so it doesn't even have to be that loneliness. Has anybody here lost a parent or a loved one or someone they were close to? How did you feel when you lost that parent, if you don't mind sharing?
I was in college, and it was my mother, my sister, and I. And my sister was on drugs, out the streets, so it was basically me and my mother. And my mother died of a heart attack suddenly. And just the whole, you're in college, you still got to push through. But the whole thing with my sister, she was doing some things that, weren't beneficial to the family, and luckily had the support of my neighbors who kind of took me in, made sure I was okay, made sure everything in school was okay, that I finished. So I had that support system that, got me through. Because there was a point that I was going to quit school. I had a job at the time. I didn't know what to do. That's all I had was my mother and my sister. And my sister was already out the door. So.
Thank you for sharing that with me. And I'll think I'll give you a hug next time I see you.
I know.
Is there anybody else that maybe you've gone through something, maybe you just got a really bad grade in school, there's kids in this. Maybe you got into a fight with your parent and they grounded you and you didn't feel like it was fair and you just gave up. It doesn't have to be anything huge and dramatic. We all go through those times when we feel lost, when we feel hopeless, and she made a very good point. Having a support system is important. And that's something I want to take a minute to talk about. How many here, and you don't have to raise your hand, but if you feel comfortable doing that, have ever had suicidal thoughts? How many of you, when you got to that point, reached out to ask for help? I'm glad you did. Most people won't. When you get that low, you don't think anybody wants you around. You think everybody's going to be happier if you're not around, that you're a burden. So it's important if you see someone that you care about and all of a sudden they're starting to withdraw a little bit more, don't wait for them to reach out to you. if someone just randomly comes on your mind, unless it's Larry, reach out to them. Send them a text and just say, hey, what's going on? You want to go get some coffee? Go like Larry. I'll even buy the rotten eggs. Now, Larry, you have been there with me recently when I was going through some hard times. What are some things that you could share on the other side?
Well, and I was going to ask that question either way, on just to let others answer, because I'll give you my summary in a second. But let me ask this. We've been around people that have gone through struggles like this and have been in those dark places. And I will answer this in just a minute. How do we identify somebody in our life that's going through that place of darkness? Because I think it's an important question. It's one thing for us to understand that I think everybody goes through different points in their life where they feel that way. How do we identify that somebody's struggling like that? Do you guys have any ideas? Yeah.
I mean, one thing is a lot of people deal with stuff like that with humor. So if you're sitting at a table with a friend and they will just like crack up and say, oh, I'm going to kill myself one day, and they just kind of joke about it, or I don't know, something like that. If they joke about it a lot where it's concerning, not just a joke here and there, I would definitely talk to them and be like, dude, there's like some underlying like seriousness behind every single time you make that remark.
Yeah, that's a great point, because that's very true. Anything else? How do we identify when people are in that place?
The officer's still here.
They're out in the meeting, but I can speak on it because I'm in the academy right now and I work. So I used to work in a jail, and one thing that we were always taught was you never ask, you just have to see it. And they always came to me because I made myself presentable. So it was easy for me to be able to see it because I could tell they weren't themselves one day. So that particular day I made myself a lot more approachable and let them feel that there was a sense of comfort. Because in a jail you only have two options, to sit there and wait or get bonded out. So they turn to the people they knew, and I was that person. So being able to see it and let them talk and realize they need to talk and be that stone they can talk to that will talk back. It will help them a lot more that I've seen from a law enforcement perspective.
Awesome. That's a great answer. Anything else?
Has anybody else known any other warning signs? Dr. Taylor?
It tends to be withdrawal. Sometimes people will, when you're not used to maybe saying I love you or whatever, they'll go out of their way to express those feelings. They will sometimes give away things that are meaningful to them, give away possessions. The humor thing I had not heard really, and that's a good point. On the medical side, they do encourage us to actually ask about suicidal ideation. So you're not going to like hide it or anything, you have, but to get the discussion going with the patient. So.
As a medical doctor, you have a little different role in that. So thank you, Dr. Taylor.
I also want to point out, because a lot of people don't realize this, but if you see someone who's going through a really rough time and all of a sudden they're super happy, be concerned. No, a lot of times what will happen is when someone has decided that they're going to end their life, they have a sense of release and euphoria because they know it's almost over.
Yeah, that is true. It's a sense of, hey, I've got a plan, now all I have to do is execute. And there's a sense of peace to that. So I will give you a little bit of, we talked about communication. Some of you know this, some of you don't. Heather has been doing a podcast for a little over a year now.
Not quite.
Or not quite a year. I thought it was more than a year. I've been helping her out for the last little bit, and we have discussions around these topics. And one of them recently kind of goes back to connections. You can't know if somebody's struggling like that if you don't know them. So it comes down to spending time with people. It comes down to building those relationships and having that relationship and spending time with them. And knowing that, hey, I need to give them a call and say, hey, do you mind if I take you out for lunch or coffee today. Why don't you come over to my house and watch a movie together? Something that you can do to increase that relationship. Now, Dr. Taylor's in one place where she does need to ask. But for a lot of us, if we just take the time to sit down with somebody and hear them out, not try and fix, but listen. Number one problem we do is we try to fix things. But if we just sit down and listen, they'll dump it at some point. Yeah.
I noticed recently there's a lot of commercials saying, you know, to try to reach out to people who are struggling. And I've noticed that on different channels.
Yeah, well, the reason is because of this post-COVID, and whether you think it's post or not, we're just going to call it post-COVID at this point, for the sake of this, is because the mental health issues are probably the highest that we've ever seen. I don't know the statistics on it. I just know what I hear from Chief. I know what I see from those I know in the medical industry. Counselors, their appointments are full. I'm seeing it everywhere I go. Some of the largest problems that we're having right now all come from the fact that people haven't dealt with loss and haven't figured out how to deal with these things. It's not necessarily mental illness in the context of what we often think, but they don't have the emotional support or the tools to help them deal with it. So that's why the commercials are all there. Yeah.
And also, our generation is probably the most in tune with their mental health as the generation's ever been. All of the older generations, and mental health was something you didn't talk about, something that you were, ashamed for.
Yeah, we don't talk about Bruno.
Heather, I've had it with you.
Just saying.
You ruined it.
Well, you're right. And actually, a couple months ago, I was on a road trip and I woke up and the Teen Nick News was on, and there was a group of middle school kids talking with the Surgeon General, and they were talking about mental health. And I was like, finally. Because you're right, when I was your age, we didn't talk about it. It got shoved away. It was something that you were embarrassed by.
Yeah, just for especially talking about specifically the modern generation, I guess you could say. The internet a lot of times, though, unfortunately, kind of expands and almost magnifies a lot of problems you have with social interactions through online in terms of isolation and how you feel about the people you interact with and everything. And it can be really, really hard to just exist on social media even. And it's very addictive purposefully so.
I just want to throw one more thing out there before we move on to hope, because this is really just so exciting and uplifting. If someone comes to you and they tell you they are thinking about ending their life, they're having suicidal thoughts, they don't want to live, whatever, I don't care if it's the first time or the millionth time they have said it, take them seriously. I reached out to a local mental health facility the night before, and I couldn't speak. People who had seen me be really upset know I have a really bad stutter when I get anxious. It was so bad I couldn't form any words. It's really hard. I had a history with some of the people there. We made oil and water look compatible. The first gentleman that came out could tell something was going on. We had never met. The second individual, who was a lady who, inappropriate words, took one look at me and said, "We don't have time to play games with you tonight. You need to go home or we're calling the police." So that's what I did. I got in my car, I drove home, crawled into bed. And the next morning when I got the call from the vet telling me that my dog had died, who wasn't even 8-year-old, actually wasn't quite 2, but anyway, didn't take it well. And since I had already been told to go away, I just said, okay, well, he's dead, I'm dead. So take it seriously. I'm not a big fan of the hospital. I think there are better ways to handle it, but if you are concerned, take someone to the hospital. They may hate you for it, but eventually I forgive them.
And just one other point, and
Sure.
it has been said already, but I think it's worth saying again. It is, if you ask people if there's, whether you're a medical professional or not, if you ask people if they're suicidal, or if you're thinking about hurting yourself, it will not put the idea in their heads if it's not there.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
There have been many times when my mom, because I've always been very, very vocal about my feelings and very empathetic in that way, but she's always taken me seriously. And there's been like 2 separate occasions where she was like, this is concerning, we're going to the hospital right now. What you're saying with me right now is not normal, we need to go. So I've always had that support system.
Yeah. I really appreciate everybody sharing because, and I think this is the heart of it. That's kind of where it starts, but this is the heart of it, where understanding and recognizing that people are in places of darkness, places where they feel like there's no hope, and then trying to find ways to help them. If there is one thing that has come out of the last couple of years that I think is very positive, is that we've recognized our need for others, that we need each other. And that's what leads to that hope, which each of these pictures kind of walks through that process of hope. And finding that place of hope, finding that place of connection, and helping people get to that point. And it's going to be a little bit different for each one. I talk about this all the time on the podcast. I'm a pastor. I have a very defined way of looking at life and a very defined way of how I find hope in that. And I have no problem sharing that because I believe that everybody has to have an anchor in their life. And the anchor in my life is my relationship with God. And that's where I find my hope and my identity. But I can tell you that people that have this anchor still find themselves here quite often. And I'm going to just do my own little rant for a second. Heather, you've put me under the bus a few times. Whether you go to church or whether you don't, everybody struggles there. And the problem is, we taught people in the church that if you didn't look like this all the time, you must not be right. So you must be doing something wrong, or you must be some kind of a failure. When the truth is that you can have that relationship and still be here, and still struggle, and still hurt. And take the faith side out of it. I believe it's foundational, but take the faith side out of it. Everybody has to have a foundational place in their life to have a place to get to hope. And that's where we've got to help people understand and recognize that there is hope, that there is something beyond this darkness, that they have value, that they have worth. So with that being said, how do you think, as individuals, how do we help people get from here to here? Yeah.
I think even if it isn't necessarily mental health that is the issue, love and patience is such an important thing because, especially from a faith perspective, like Jesus provides us endless, never-ending, reckless love. And it is important that we reflect it in our lives to others, that we continue to love them no matter what they're going through and what we're going through. We can't lose hope in that. And like when people are struggling, you have to be patient with them, because there are going to be days where they don't want to talk. Like, I know there have been days with Heather where I want to have a conversation and Heather just, words are hard now, and she can't get words out. And I have to be patient and know, that's not the moment. Doesn't mean she doesn't care, it doesn't mean she doesn't want to talk. It's having that love and patience to know that they will come around and you have to be there in their corner no matter what it is, no matter how hard someone pushes back. You have to be patient and continue to love them unfailingly.
Awesome answer. Anyone else?
One,
Yeah.
I think if you can take the focus off yourself and get involved in helping others, that can bring you out of that dark space.
As an individual that's here, is what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Getting out and serving some other people. Absolutely.
Yeah, one thing is creating the space to accept that this is real. You know, a lot of times people feel like, okay, they need to mask this because we need to be always bubbly and happy. And why are you not happy? I mean, how many times have you had people go, why are you not smiling? You know, but, and it's almost like, if the space is not there for me to accept that I'm having a horrible day, then that is masked, but it is still happening here. And if I'm masking it, then it's not real. And if it's not real, then I'm not going to seek help for it. So it is very important that we create this space that others know, and for us to know that when you're having a bad day, it's not that you are bad. It's that something very real is happening to you, and there's a way to get out of it. But the first thing is accepting that is happening before you can move on to the next place.
Okay.
I'm still learning on how to get to that point in my life, but I do know that it's real and I know that it's achievable. But my whole life I've been very, very consumed with others, and like they were saying before, putting others before yourself, and I'm finally into that. I was told throughout childhood that I was careless and self-conceited, and never worried about other people. I just worried about myself all the time. And I think I'm finally getting to a point where I want to learn how to be okay with myself and my needs and putting them before anything else for me in order to grow to that point in my life. Because if I'm just serving everyone else but never serving myself, because in my life that's always been selfish and something that if you're wrong, you just...
Well, I want you to feel help. This isn't linear. It's not like a video game where you level up and then you just never go back.
Yeah.
You're great at that work, but it doesn't. And in some places in your life, you can be at different phases. And that's okay. The good news is it's not like the old school video games, which I grew up with. They didn't have save points. Where you had to start completely over. You do get a save. And the other really cool thing is that even if you do end up all the way back over there, you still have all the life experience that was over here before you ended back up over there. So there's always going to be that hope that you can get back. And I want to point something out. If you look at the photo, anybody see how fragile that flame is? Hope is like that flame. It has to be protected and has to be kindled. Think about when you go camping or you set things on fire in a ring to cook food on, because otherwise it's arson. A raging forest fire starts with a single spark. But that single spark has to have the fuel, which in this case would be the support. And it has to have the right conditions so that it can grow and it can continue to feed. And it's okay if you get stuck here for a little while. Just remember that you can get there. So what are some examples in your lives maybe where you had that little spark of hope, or maybe you were just having a really rotten day and then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, huh, maybe it's not going to completely suck. Anybody? Anybody here have a dog? When you go home to see your dog, does that not give you endless amounts of love, affection, and hope?
I just already feel like I've been talking too much, so like I'm just letting other people just kind of like, yeah, I do, but like, come on.
What about the old people like Steven?
I don't have a dog.
You're a cat person, aren't you?
Same.
I'm a peak person.
There you go.
I know sometimes, like you have a hard day at work, and let's say you get written up, or you get threatened with your job, and when that, not from personal experience, but like when that, it's time to go at 5 o'clock, and it's like, the day is done, wash this off, we try and get tomorrow to do better.
Anybody else?
When you go through a line at the the drive-through at the coffee shop, and the person before you paid for your ticket.
I mean, like more or less similar to that, like one thing that I've always very much liked, and I've done it like all my life, is no matter how bad of a day I've had, when I like go to bed, and like I don't usually like immediately sleep when I go to bed, so I go to bed and I'm like, this is just like the reset area where I don't worry about anything else that happened throughout the day. I can just relax.
People actually go to sleep when they go to bed.
Sometimes.
Not me with my insomnia.
Sometimes.
Wow, it's like putting your pants on all your time. I learned all these new things.
You know my dog.
Yes, I do.
And it's funny that you brought up the dog, because that's what I was gonna say before you said that. That's my de-stress, like, I had days of very stressful times between work and life and paid week. Just kidding, I love it. But that's what I do. Honestly, when I take my breaks and try to de-stress, I go sit with Forrest and just let him love. Because animals just do, they just love.
Dr. Taylor made a very good point earlier, and in the multitude of years of therapy that I have been through, some of it has actually been helpful. And one of the coping skills that I was taught that actually worked was when you do stuff for other people. So Jane is helping me crochet blankets for the homeless that we're going to donate. By the way, I got a lot more spreadsheet put together. A few years ago, someone had mentioned shattering their ankle. I had surgery on my right ankle and was laid up for 6 weeks, which meant that I was stuck at home. Yeah.
That's the right word.
Yes, it's the appropriate word. So I started crocheting hats to donate to the homeless, and I've continued doing that every year since. Which, by the way, if anybody needs some, I have a ridiculous amount at home that are looking for homes. That's why I switched to blankets. And in all honesty, even this isn't about me. This is about you guys. And this is about the people who haven't found their own voice. I have a variety of different projects that I'm working on, including the Identity Stolen Project. And the whole idea behind that is to give people an opportunity to share their stories through image. Long before I was comfortable speaking to people, I spoke through my artwork. Didn't even realize I was doing it as a little kid, but even as a little kid, I would draw out my feelings because, say it with me,
Words are hard.
So I just encourage you to think about how you can help somebody else, because if you don't have a support system, which I didn't used to. I'm very grateful and thankful and lucky to have the support system I do now. But sometimes you have to find your own spark of hope. And you have to really try even harder to keep it kindled and going.
All right, we're gonna wrap up with just a little bit. A couple things as we kind of wind this down. I want to encourage you before you go to go and look through some of the artwork. There are books here. I will ask this, Heather won't, I'll ask it. If you want to go in the books, you can purchase them on Amazon. If you'd like to make a donation to help kind of offset the cost of doing this, that would be awesome. Or you can buy them. We'd love for everybody to get a book if you don't already have one. There's two of them there. One's, obviously the words are hard. The other one is to do with connections and making those connections. I want to wrap up with this last question. Would anybody feel comfortable in sharing maybe some experiences that you've had? We've shared a few already of how you have gotten from here to here, and what were some practical steps maybe where somebody's helped you in your life, or there's been something that's helped you, or where you've been able to help somebody else, and then we're going to wrap up. Anything else? I just want to make sure we have time. Anybody else want to say anything to that?
You.
Great movie, by the way. All right. I will say this. Mental health, all of that stuff that we label, and we put labels on it because we need to identify things, especially people in the medical world. We need to know what things are, but those things are not your identity. They're not who you are. They're a part of who you are. They're things that you struggle with, they're things that you go through, but they're not who you are. You need to find that place where you have people in your life that help to build up who you are and recognize who you are. One of the things, I've walked with Heather through a lot of things. I met her, 5-6 years ago now?
2016.
Yeah, so this would be 6 years ago. And when I first met Heather, she wouldn't look at me at all. She wouldn't look at anybody. Actually, the first time she came to our church, she would sit there and come in, and about 20 seconds later, if anybody looked at her, she'd run out the door like a scared deer. And the reason I'm sharing this story, because she's put me under the bus a lot, is the reason we're standing here today is because there are people that took the time to be patient enough to find out who Heather is, to find the value, to find what she's passionate about. Her sense of humor, yes. It's sometimes a very dangerous sense of humor, but it's a sense of humor. But it takes people in our lives to be patient, to take the time to get to know somebody, to spend time with them, to go along on the journey with them. We sometimes count our worth by how many people we have in our lives, but truly, if we can get a handful of people that we actually do life together with, that we spend time with, that we enjoy being around, that can be there when they know that we're struggling here, and they don't come in and try and fix it, but they just sit there with you and cry and weep. And that walk with you from here to here. That's what we need. We need people that take the time to actually spend time with somebody and care about somebody.
He's not exaggerating. I didn't even call him by his real name for like the first 3 years.
That's true. It went from sir to, I don't even know.
Pastor.
Yeah, it did. It ended up on a bunch of different things. But the point of that is that Heather, for me, even though much of her life she's been identified by the labels that are on her, Heather, for me, as a friend, I tell her she's part of my family. Actually, we lost my mom last year. Heather was with us to go clean out the house, take care of things, walk with us through that. Why? Because she's a part of our family. So I support Heather in this. I think what she has to do, and if you have an organization where you have a staff or a team, I know at Mind and Body, she's done this for you guys before, and she comes in and talks about the stigma of mental health, how for your business or your organization, you can better identify and help people, help those that are struggling. I want to commend, and I know Sergeant Meats, if he's here, he's hiding behind the curtain, but he's really been a big help for Heather and put a card together that helps her that if she ever has an encounter with police department or anybody of authority when she's having a difficult time, it helps explain what's going on with her because she won't be able to talk. She will go completely, the stutter and everything will take over to where she can't communicate except for by phone. That little card has helped her get through difficult situations. And on that card's a couple phone numbers, and those phone numbers are called, and I've been able to help walk medical professionals and firemen that have been helping her through those situations so they didn't end up in places that would have been, yeah. So those are all things. Anything else before we wrap up today? Any other comments? Yeah, Micah.
Yeah, it's interesting for me personally because I have never ever really struggled at any point to memory in my life with self-worth or hopelessness. One thing that I really struggle with from time to time is being able to understand and connect with people emotionally at all. Like I just and I react very harshly, I guess, to stuff like that, and I'll go through periods of time where I don't even like in specific times I will feel extremely alone because I feel like just I understand absolutely nobody around me and getting through things. My brain works very
Struggle with compassion. You're right, son. You did get that from me, by the way.
Well, like, and then if I do, like, it's usually through very, like, extreme circumstances that I will connect with people. But, like, even stuff like when we lost my grandma, like, I just felt like I didn't feel much of anything, and that, like, I was, like, worried about that. Like, I would feel like sometime, like, an extreme moment of being sad from that loss, but otherwise I just felt nothing from it.
I'm gonna challenge you. Because my guess is that you are feeling things, you just don't recognize them. Not that I know anything about that. But you're an artist, and I know this about you, so next time you're struggling with something like that, pull out your sketch pad, pull out your pencil, and write. Just get it out of your head, because you probably are feeling, you just don't know what it is.
Actually, speaking of that specifically, the one thing that I did do after I found out we had lost my grandma, I wrote a series, like a book, I guess, of bad poetry.
You're a teenager, as expected.
But yeah, no, writing, and then I have a YouTube channel, and writing through that, it's been a really helpful way to just express things. So writing is definitely.
Is there anything else you want to share? Okay. All right. Heather's got cards back here. They have a little QR code. It will lead you to the podcast that we've been doing and some other things. If you ever want Heather to come, or if you ever know of opportunities for Heather to come and share some of the things that she does, or you want to do a workshop with artwork to work how people work through things through artwork, she can do all of those things and help you with that. I'm her biggest cheerleader in this stuff. I really believe in it. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, there's some snacks, water, coffee. Help yourself to that. Please look through all of the stuff that is here. Make sure you grab some cards. And I want to thank you guys for being here and taking the time to be here tonight.
And if anybody has questions or concerns, you can bring the questions here and the concerns there.
Thanks, guys.
Why?
don't know.